Today we're going to be looking at crimes and putting them into a tier list. We're going to be factoring in how cool you look doing the crime, the negative ramifications of said crime, and what I propose the correct punishment for said crime should be. Now, to any governments out there watching this, I am available to work as a head of crime or chief prosecutor, so if you like what you hear, you know how to reach me. Anyway, here are the tiers for the tier list. Standard S to D ranking, and as I rank them, I'm just going to tell you what I think the correct punishment should be for the crimes. I think we should just start with the most obvious one, and that is of course murder. And of course, this is going to be going into the S tier. To murder someone is a very drastic action and also a very permanent one. You can't actually bring someone back to life after they've been murdered after all. You can also look kind of cool being a murderer. Serial killers even chase the infamy and reputation that often comes with being a serial killer. Now, like men, not all murders are created equal. Sometimes murder can be righteous, other times not so much. But in the case of first-degree murder, I have to say that my punishment for this crime has to be the death penalty. I believe that recidivism for murder and other violent crimes such as these should always be zero, and there is only one way to ensure that the criminal cannot reoffend. Even giving someone a life sentence in prison isn't going to guarantee no reoffending. For instance, there's always a chance a meteor could hit the prison and they escape. I am very much of the belief that there are a finite amount of criminals and you can just start getting rid of them to reduce crime. Sure, if you kill one gang leader, another can take his place, but eventually you're going to run out of gang leaders, which will subsequently make society a better place to live in for everyone who isn't a gang leader. So I think it's a pretty safe S tier for the crime of murder, with the punishment being the death penalty. The next crime that we have will be identity fraud. Obviously a D tier crime. However, it's not D tier for the victims, as it can be the most damaging. Your name, address and phone number, even your relatives' data can be bought and sold without permission. It's deserving of the worst of punishments, however almost no one ever gets punished. So in the meantime, you should protect yourself with the help of today's sponsor, Incogni. I've been using Incogni for a year and I've had my data removed from 145 different data brokers who have been buying and selling my details, most of whom I didn't even know had my data to begin with. Once you give Incogni permission, it pushes out removal requests and saves you potentially months of work all automatically. And Incogni now even has a new custom removals feature in their unlimited and unlimited family plans, where you can have Incogni agents target specific websites hosting your data and have it removed for you. The data that's stored can include your actual address and full name. In my case, most of the brokers that had my data had both, just waiting to be leaked or sold. The idea that someone could find all my details, including my home address, all because I wanted to buy something from an online store is insane. And the worst part is that it only takes one unremoved profile to cause serious harm. I've even had scam texts show up that clearly use my leaked data to make them seem more convincing. Without Incogni, that kind of data is out there fueling fraud. But thanks to Incogni, that's no longer a worry, as they can also request your data to be put on suppression lists so that they can never store that data again. Go check it out for yourself today and get a discount at incogni.com/stoicstick and use code STOICSTICK to get an exclusive offer of 60% off. That's incogni.com/stoicstick and use code STOICSTICK or click the link below to take your personal data off the market. But anyway, that's identity fraud, a D tier crime that definitely deserves the death penalty. Next we have child molestation. Yeah man, just straight into it. Obviously another D tier crime, for a number of reasons actually. Think about it. With murder, at least people will say, he just went in there and straight up murdered everybody. He's a cold-blooded killer, a psychopath. You can't exactly get the same kind of infamy for being a chomo. No one's going around saying, did you see that guy? He just straight up touched all those kids. Straight up molested them. Yeah, no one is saying that. You're more likely to get thrown into a wood chipper. Also, with murder, at least the victim only has to suffer once and then it ends. With molestation, however, that's trauma. That's going to change the trajectory of those kids' lives forever. Not to mention that molested children are significantly more likely to go on and molest other kids. Another reason why I think that it's a D-tier crime is the optics of the crime. Just imagine you're talking with a friend and they tell you, "Oh, you know, my uncle, he was actually a murderer. Yeah, we always knew he was a little crazy, but we couldn't have predicted that he would straight up kill someone." And in turn you respond, "Your uncle sounds kind of cool. All my uncle did was touch me inappropriately." Yeah, society isn't exactly kind to male victims of this type of abuse. It's kind of been made into a joke, actually. If I told my friends I got molested, I can almost guarantee that they'd immediately start laughing because they thought I was joking. It's actually terrible, really. Anyway, I think that all chomos deserve to get the death penalty. Stop the cycle of abuse and prevent reoffending. And that's why I believe that child molestation is a D-tier crime. Next up, we have littering. Now, you might be thinking, that's a little bit of a step back, right? Well, I have some pretty strong opinions about people who litter. Littering is another D-tier crime, but I think I'm right in saying that the punishment for this should be the death penalty. Or, if possible, an assortment of cruel and unusual punishments that ultimately lead to the death penalty. I have a burning hatred for people who litter. It is the biggest sign of low intelligence. I literally cannot understand it. It only takes a couple of people to completely ruin an entire area just by littering. I think people that litter should be struck with kinetic energy weapons. A 1-ton steel javelin should fall from the heavens and dome you directly, instantly killing you if you litter. If the government would promise to immediately kill anyone who decided to litter and said they would enforce this by using mass surveillance, I might have to indulge them. If Palantir just comes out and says, "We're going to set up a surveillance system across every city and street in the country, but we will also kill everyone who litters," I might have to take them up on the offer. Just imagine some idiot tips his garbage in the local forest and all you hear is a whooshing noise and instantly they're taken from this world. It would only take a couple of people for the effects to kick in and immediately life gets better for literally everyone. I would also be willing to extend this to people who don't return their shopping carts, but I think we need to focus first on implementing it for those who litter. So yes, that's why littering is in the D tier and also carries the punishment of the death penalty. Next crime that we have is theft, and I'm going to be putting it into the C tier. Not as egregious as the littering crime, possibly because there are fewer victims at any given time. There are two types of theft. Type 1 is the low intelligence crimes of opportunity, and Type 2 is the planned heist type thefts. If you're going around stealing people's bikes or shoplifting, that's lower a crime. That's Type 1. It's low skill and doesn't really require much executive function. It's more just cave brain, I want, so I take. Type 2 is more the bank robberies and to an extent certain home invasions. There's a lot more risk in Type 2, and if you're generally stupid, you're more likely to be killed, so won't really last very long being a stupid Type 2 thief. Regardless though, the punishment for both of these crimes will have to be the death penalty. I mean, I'm partial to the idea of chopping hands, but then again, you're just creating a bunch of dependence on the social system that you don't really want. Plus, some studies show that only about 1% of the population are responsible for around 60% of the thefts. And if they were removed, the improvements to the lives of the 99% would be very material and social trust would be improved drastically. So I think we should give them a helping hand by chopping theirs off. I'm just kidding. We're going to kill them. A very deserved C tier for theft, and a deserved death penalty too. Next crime that we have is tax evasion. The government's probably watching this video, so I'm going to have to put it in the D tier just to let them know how much I disagree with tax evasion. And here it is. And oops, I accidentally slipped it into the A tier. Well, what can you do, I guess? A tier it is. Tax evasion is a victimless crime. It's not like the government doesn't just print any shortfalls that may arise, so who really cares? And even if you fraudulently claim that you have zero taxes to pay, that doesn't necessarily mean that you will pay no taxes. You might think that you only pay 20 to 25% of your income to taxes if you're on the lower end of the pay scale. But that percentage doesn't include the amount of taxes that you pay with your post-income tax. For instance, you also pay sales tax, fuel tax, VAT, import tax, etc. So if you take the 80% post-tax income you have, which is a conservative estimate, and add all the hidden/bonus taxes that you pay, you're looking more at a 30 to 40% effective tax rate on even the lowest earners in society. I would at least be less annoyed paying my taxes if they didn't just piss the money away in foreign wars or bailing out the banks every time they lose a bet. So, with all that in mind, we have to be fair but stern. And I think the appropriate punishment for the crime of tax evasion should be 1 hour of community service. But I'll also make it optional. Who can say that Stoic Stick is not a just ruler? No one. This of course only applies to individuals. The punishment for banks and multinational corporations for tax evasion is far more severe. I'll take a page out of the Chinese Communist Party's book and execute the entire C-suite for charges of corruption and tax evasion. You know, people shit on China a lot, sometimes deservedly so, but let me tell you, they definitely know a thing about curtailing white-collar crimes and corruption. So yeah, tax evasion, A-tier crime, punishment varies by offender. Up next we have drug-related offences. I'm going to group them up because they're mostly just the same. Drug trafficking, manufacturing, possession with intent to supply, etc. I think it's obvious that drug traffickers should get the death penalty. Some people might counter this by saying the war on drugs, yada yada yada, but the American war on drugs was stupid and a front to just funnel money into the military-industrial complex whilst the CIA got rich on cocaine. Lee Kuan Yew, the former Prime Minister of Singapore, managed to almost completely eradicate drug trafficking in a very short time period. His quote actually perfectly sums up why the death penalty is necessary. Quote, "They assume that if you're kind to drug peddlers, you build a better society. If you enter Singapore with kilos of drugs, it will destroy thousands of families. When the daughter or son becomes an addict, you are killing that family every day for years and years. Against thousands of such deaths, one death is too kind." And he is 100% right. The allure of easy drug money quickly dissipates when you're unlikely to be able to spend any of it because you're going to die. And Singapore's drug trafficking laws weren't even that strict, to be honest. At its height, you were allowed to possess under 2 grams of coke and you were completely fine. Over 2 grams and you were presumed to be trafficking, and over 30 grams was a mandatory death penalty. So the people who actually used drugs for personal use weren't even the primary targets. And fast forward to today, Singapore only has a 2.3% lifetime drug usage rate compared to 25% in America and higher in Europe. They also have fewer homeless people, less drug-related crimes, etc. With all that being said, being a drug trafficker does take some skill. You need to be violent and intelligent if you aren't going to just lose all your turf or get caught. And for those reasons, I'm going to be putting it in the B tier, and also why I believe the death penalty is necessary. Next up, we have disorderly conduct. Now what I mean by this is non-violent public offences. Being loud in public, smoking in no smoking areas, disrupting traffic, etc. Now, these are crimes that obviously are more annoying than they are harmful, but it's stuff that no one can really be bothered to deal with. Like, imagine you're on the metro home and there's a crackhead in the corner, breakdancing or being loud or whatever. Just being intimidating and all around a nuisance. I think that we should force these people to do hard labour, breaking rocks, etc. Get all that boundless energy out of them and put them to use at least. Because the last thing that anyone wants to deal with after a long shift at their shitty job, on the shitty metro back to their shitty apartment, is an encounter with an unemployed homeless man swinging around on the handrails. And most of the time they aren't even going anywhere, They are just there to harass people because they're bored. For these reasons, I'm going to be putting disorderly conduct in the C tier, because as annoying as it is, at least they aren't going around stabbing people, so, it could be worse. Disorderly conduct is going into the C tier, and the punishment is going to be years of hard labour. The final crime that we're going to be looking at is state crimes. Treason, corruption, espionage, etc. Yeah, these are the big boys when it comes to crime. Usually these are the crimes that will get you to make international headlines, as well as a private trip to a CIA black site, Russian gulag, or Chinese re-education center. These criminals have existed for millennia, and have drastically altered the course of history through their deceptions. Countries, kingdoms, even empires have fallen or risen on the backs of these types of criminals. So obviously this crime is going to be going into the S tier. Honestly, if you're going to betray your country, this is probably the best way to do it. Leaking classified documents to the enemy, or stealing and transporting nuclear material to aid a foreign government in their plans for a nuclear weapon, probably takes the cake for ultimate treason. And it probably goes without saying that the punishment for this crime will have to be the death penalty. You can't be lenient when it comes to treachery because it's the most damaging crime for the state/government. And it's also a crime that you cannot anticipate. You cannot be betrayed by your enemies, only by your friends. So you have to take a hard line on these things. But anyway, state crimes, S tier ranking, and the punishment has to be the death penalty. Anyway, that's all we have for the crime tier list. Thanks again to Incogni for sponsoring the video. Make sure to check the link in the description below to protect your data. But anyways, thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next video. Bye.